Everybody, and welcome back to Always Almost There Live. It has been 2 months since the last time we did one of these. A little bit of an off season for the summer for Goose, but we are back. This is kicking off, a pretty busy few weeks for us here on the podcast with Fall Tour kicking off tomorrow. And we're really, really excited to be able to, bring in the season, get back in the mood with very special guests today. We have Mr. Joel Cummins of Umphrey's McGee in the house. Hi, Joel.
What's going on, everybody?
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We are really excited to dive into the recent shows where our very own Spuds filled in for Umphrey's drummer, Kris Myers. He did 6 shows with you guys over the last couple of weeks. I listened to all of them. They sounded amazing. Really cool to hear him fit into your sound. And so we're really excited to dive in and hear more about all of this from your perspective.
I'm looking forward to talking about it. It was really, really cool to be able to, do this with Ben and to just, I don't know, get after creating something new together. He was way into it too.
Awesome. Amazing. Hi, Neil and B. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Thanks for being on, Joel. And, well wishes to Kris also. Hope things are going well with this recovery.
They are. Yeah. He had a successful surgery. We actually were able to have the surgeon who does Tommy John surgery and all that for the Chicago Cubs did it for him. So we had somebody who, was very, very well informed with rotator cuff issues. And he's at home healing. And, I know he's out of his sling now. So he's pretty stoked about that. He can finally, he's left-handed, so he had to learn how to do things right-handed for the past month, which I really wish I could have been around him more to experience that and, do a little poking fun at him. But we're happy it went well, obviously. And really just, I think, kind of over the moon about all the support that we've gotten from the community and all these, these people that Kris was like, oh, wow. Like these people like really, really like me. And we're like, yeah, man, they got a lot of respect for you. So,
yeah.
So it was cool to see that too, not just for us, but also for him, because I mean, that guy just works his ass off every night behind the kit. And, we knew it was going to be really challenging to do stuff without him. And so we really had to go for the A-team to try to find somebody that can handle what he does.
Awesome. Well, let's kick things off here. Before we get into the specific shows that just happened, let's go back, turn back the clock a little bit to the beginnings of kind of the Umphrey's Goose relationship. When did you first meet Ben? I know that there was a sit-in a couple of years ago, another show that Kris unfortunately had to miss. But take us back, when was the first time Goose flew across your radar?
Yeah, so it was the I'm not sure if I can remember the name of this exactly, but it was Sewanee Park in Florida in April of 2021. So it was really going to be our first show back in front of people. And Kris had a side gig the week before and ended up getting COVID. So had the unfortunate experience of trying to figure out how to put together a set with 2 days before we were going in there. And so we looked at who was playing and we saw the Goose guys were playing. So we reached out to Ben at that point and he was down. I think he played Making Flippy Floppy with us that day.
Yes.
And, that's one of those that's just such a fun cover to do. It's got to be in our like top 25 covers played all time, I would probably have about 700 or something that we've done at this point. But just super fun one. And we knew that Ben would be able to lock in and totally crush it. So that was cool. So we had him up for that and got to hang out with the rest of the band that day too, which was also pretty fun. Just whenever you get those backstage hangs and in this case, making some new friends. So we were into that. And I think it was holidays of that year that Ben and Sam also came to that event. So we got to hang out with them a bunch at the end of the year too. But then the next thing that happened, I guess, take it all the way to 2023 And my friend Fred Torfey and his band Big Light have done a New Orleans show over Jazz Fest the past couple of years, and he called me up and was telling me about how they had another local band play with him last year. And he's like, do you know anybody who'd want to do it? And the whole time I'm thinking, it's me. I'm your guy. I'm your guy. And so Fred was actually the one. I told him I would do it, and I'm like, okay, I'll find a drummer. I'll find somebody who's probably local to play with. I've done a couple duo shows with Jason Hahn from String Cheese Incident as well. So kind of in the spirit of that. And like a week after that conversation, the Goose was headlining Days Between down in New Orleans came up, and our show was on Thursday and those shows were on Tuesday, Wednesday. And so Fred was actually the one who said to me, he's like, do you know Ben? You should ask him. And I was like, oh man, I don't know if he'd want to do it. I'm like, I might as well do it. Let's see if he's sticking around. And I wrote him, and, to my pleasant surprise, he was into it and was like, yeah, man, Sam and I were planning on sticking around New Orleans anyway. I don't have anything to do, so let's do it. And he was in, and, the rest is history. We played like a 2.5-hour set that night in New Orleans and just had a blast. It was really, really fun. And, Ben's a guy who is just so solid, does his homework, and showed up super prepared, which made it even more fun for all of us. And, I feel like at the end of that night, we're hugging each other. Love you, man. I love you. This is fucking sweet. Let's do it again. Yeah. So it was a really special night. And I was super stoked that he was the one that ended up playing drums on that.
Awesome. Very cool. And then Resonance, obviously, that was significant. We talked a lot about that one on our summer tour recap, which everyone can go listen to if they're so inclined. But from your perspective, how did that sit-in come about?
So, I think we'd all seen each other. We hung out a bunch at summer camp, which Goose played, back in May. And then we saw each other again the next week. I was up at Electric Forest, so I was hanging out a little bit and, got to kick it with everybody for a bit there too. So I feel like, we just kept running into each other, and it was really nice of those guys to come up with the idea to invite Jake and me up there. So they told us at the beginning of the day, and of course where Resonance has very poor internet connectivity. They're like, yeah, we're going to do the song Empress. And I'm like, oh God, I got to download this or something, because there's all these parts we got to go through. So Jake and I spent, probably an hour before the sit-in going through and kind of going through the form and documenting it. And then I was texting with Peter a little bit just to make sure, we had the voicings or, the progressions right. So I would say compared to most sit-ins, it was really nice because Jake and I had the time that day to go through and really do a little homework so that when we got up there, we knew what changes were coming, and we kind of had an idea of the sort of things that we could add to the song that might give it a little, a little extra something.
Yeah, and it did give it a lot of extra something. Oh, yeah. I mean, just such fire version. I love that version so much. I thought you guys did such a killer job. I mean, both of you added so much to that song. And in fact, when we were talking about it on the pod, I think one of my wishes was, man, I kind of really hope that, Rick and Peter kind of pick up on some of those fills and some of those nuances and things and add that in, because it sounded, it definitely didn't sound to anyone, I don't think, like you had just learned that song. I mean, just the stuff that was being thrown into it. I mean, it sounded amazing. You guys really crushed it.
Jake is such an inspiring player. So, to hear him and Rick kind of trade off and go back and forth was really cool. It was funny because I was playing the Vintage Vibe, which faces away from the stage for the first half of it, and I was like, I gotta switch over to the piano here so I can see what's happening. So yeah, the second half of it, I remember jumping in there and kind of adding this little progression in the D dominant section there at the end that seemed to be really gelling with what Rick was playing. So I remember that moment in particular being like, okay, now I've got something that's like really into the harmonic glue here and kind of fitting with what's happening. And I enjoyed that. But yeah, that was the first time I've really gotten to play a vintage vibe live. And I ordered one back in December, and it just got delivered to our Stone Pony show in August. So I've had it now for the past couple weekends of shows, but I was like, oh, I'm definitely sitting down and playing this thing. So yeah, I was stoked to get in there. And it's nice because that song has so many different sections with kind of different feels in them that it really does make sense to have some different tones going on. So that progression of going from the vibe over to the piano seemed to work pretty well as far as the section to section thing.
Mm-hmm. And it was really cool because Peter doesn't play in a jazzy mode a lot of the time, and so getting you kind of throwing that in there gave a really cool different dimension to it. And it was funny, Neil and I, we were at Peach that weekend, and when the soundboards dropped, it was like the end of the last night, and so we were back in the hotel listening to the Empress for the first time, and we were saying like, man, like they must have decided this like a week ago. Like you and Jake sounded so well rehearsed for that. And then I asked you, and you were like, no, like we did that day.
Yeah, well, I think part of being in an improvisational band, we've been together now for 25 years, and so your ear, if you work at it, it's like I can understand things now so much more quickly than I could even 10 or 15 years ago, and so it's just a constant sort of progression and continuing to learn and continuing to work on picking up on things more quickly, so that you can react live in the moment and do something cool, right? Yeah, and that language is obviously something when you mix a little bit of Umphrey's and Goose, we understand what each other are doing and kind of what we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to get there. So yeah. I think there's inherently that sort of understanding right from the beginning, and that really helped those moments too. We had the framework of what we knew was going to happen, and then it was about filling in all the colors in between.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I think that moment really struck me when you were all playing there. Like Rick was beaming. Obviously, he really appreciates you and he appreciates Jake. And when they were kind of trading licks off at one point, it was something else. It's one of the best versions of that song that's been done all year. And,
well, thank you. Yeah, I mean,
absolutely killer.
It was one of those moments. Not all sit-ins are great, and it was one of those moments. I remember walking off the stage, and I was like, man, I felt like something really happened there, and like the crowd was super into it too. So there was, there was just a lot of synchronicity, I think, happening at that moment.
Yeah, and I think all three of us have it on our Jam of the Year list right now. But we could talk about this Empress for hours and hours, of course. But we're here to talk about Spuds playing with Umphrey's over the last few weeks. So tell us about when you figured out that Kris was going to need this surgery, and when that you were going to need these other drummers to fill in. Like, how quickly were you like, let's call Ben?
So we made. The first thing we did was all of us just kind of racked our brains, and we made a huge spreadsheet with a list. And then we eventually kind of put people in order of like rank that we were going to ask them. But we had to have this huge spreadsheet because most of these people were out touring. Right. And so it was kind of a chess game of being like, okay, well, this person's available this weekend, but not this weekend. So we need somebody here. Let's check all their tour schedules and see who is not working this weekend. So, I mean, it was a pretty wild couple days of like just getting who our wish list was sorted. And I think, Ben was way up there. I obviously vouched for him and was like, I had a great experience with him, and he's come up and hung out with a bunch of the other guys in the band before too. So I think there was kind of a good comfort level as far as our personalities already. And then we looked at the Goose schedule and we're like, oh, they have off a bunch of this time. So he was. I think he and Dwayne were kind of the first people that we asked, and we felt so lucky that they were both like, yeah, whatever we can do to help Kris out, man, you know, and help you guys out. So so that was kind of, you know, that was kind of step one. And so from there, Brennan came up with this idea. He's like, you know, we have this site called All Things Umphrey's, where you can search the entire database and, you know, make lists, just like, you know, I'm sure Goose has this sort of thing too, but, you know, the fish database that people were used to using too, I feel like that's probably the biggest one out there. So I made a list of all of the songs and, like, you know, our most popular 50 originals that we've played for the past 3 months, so that they would get an idea of, here's what we've been playing the most, that, you know, is probably, yeah, you know, probably the most important stuff for us to learn. Immediately, there were a number of songs that we had to rule out because Kris has important vocal parts on them that Jake and I can't really cover while we're playing, you know?
Right.
So there were a few things I've tried to pick up as much as I can. I've done a lot of the Kris background vocals on stuff, but there have just been a few songs where we said we couldn't do them, or it was like, let's try it without his part and see how it sounds, you know? So I think it was funny. We asked Ben, you're like, Ben, do you sing? And he's like,
oh man,
throw on a butter rum.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he said. He's like, I get 2 words.
That's great.
But yeah, so he was like, yeah, I'm not your guy for singing. You guys got to handle that. So
Ben's more of the, you know, happy birthday announcement guy.
Yes.
Go see Doughy Joey after the show.
Nice.
You know, those are his biggest vocals.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Yeah, it's funny. We just had a thing this weekend that we realized, and I hope this doesn't get back to Brendan, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Bob, our monitor engineer, he's like, God, Brendan is just so bad at introducing guests. He's like, hey everybody, why don't you give a warm welcome for Ben? Like, say Ben from Goose, man. Like, you know, tell people who it is. Hey, right. Everybody, give it up. Here's Claude Coleman. Wait. Say Claude Coleman from Ween, dude. You know, so we decided this past weekend that all intros and good news I have to say, and I'm only allowed to announce bad news.
Good.
Because he makes good news sound like bad news, you know. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, but yeah, so we sent Ben. This was Brendan's idea. He's like, make a list of, like, what are the 50 songs that we've played the most. Send it to him, and then he can kind of listen to them and pick from there. So we did this with most of the drummers, and so, you know, there are obviously some songs, like Dwayne picked a few of the proggier ones, like Bridgeless. What else? I'm trying to think what else he did. I think he did Plunger too, but Ben picked Plunger, which is one of our harder tunes, and absolutely crushed it. Did such a great job with it. Yeah. But I think, you know, bigger than anything, and this is what we told him, we're like, look, learn the parts and do what you can, and then we'll have another list of like 25 of our songs that are on the easier side to learn, right? And we can kind of sprinkle those in, and then, you know, we can pick a couple covers for each night that we can do. But our kind of modus operandi was that we said we intend to, like, take these out further than we have before with you. And, you know, we know you get that sort of vibe. And we've been really blown away with his patience and his ability to kind of keep something at a lower intensity and have these really nice gradual builds over time, and just sticking in that groove and you know, keeping with it. So I'm pretty sure this version of Small Strides that we did with him from Asheville is the longest version that we've ever played. I think it was, you know, like almost 20 minutes, maybe just under 20. And in particular, this night, I was just loving it up there. You know, Brendan, we kind of hit back to the instrumental head section at the end, and then vocals come in, and Brendan kept just like egging Ben and Jake on to like keep going. And so this last instrumental section, like the crowd is just going nuts, and it just doesn't end. It was one of those really fun live moments that I'll probably remember forever as being like for now the apex of this song.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's really good insight. I know we were curious about a lot of the kind of set list construction, elements that go into having guests and things like that. So just one more question about that. You mentioned some songs were kind of left off because of Kris's background vocals. Were there also some songs just because of the complexities that were automatically kind of a no-go?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we wouldn't have said no to any song that that he wanted to learn for sure. I mean, I've done for if our like super heavy metal tune, Wizard Burial Ground, I've done a duo keyboard.
I was there for that.
You were there for that in Denver with Jason Hand. So Jason learned it, and it's like, okay, this guy learned it, and we did it as a keyboard drum thing. Like, certainly, I think at some point somebody's going to play that with us. Maybe we'll have to make Ben learn that for a future show.
Yeah.
That's supposed to prompt your guys' question. What future show?
Yeah, it's all hypothetical. Anything can happen. But hopefully there's not a further need for a guest drummer that Kris comes back. But we'd love to see further collaborations in the future for fun.
Yeah. Well, let's just put it this way: there might be something else that Ben can do with us before this whole little time period is over. So I don't want to say anything and give it away here, but for those mixed Umphreys and Goose fans out there, you might have something to look forward to.
That's very
I
exciting.
think we're all excited about it. This is a good time to bring up Kev, who couldn't be here. He's normally on the podcast.
one of our other co-hosts.
One of the biggest Umphreys fans I know, one of the biggest Goose fans I know. So I know right now he's really, really excited. So
is this Kevin Brinkman?
Kev, one of our other Always Almost There co-hosts, who was fortunately he's a teacher, but unfortunately that means he couldn't join us this afternoon.
Hey, my parents were both teachers, so respect.
There we go. All right. Well, we're curious now. You kind of touched on, you had a purpose that you wanted to jam things out. Obviously, less songs in a show, easier for Ben to learn. How, I know Umphrey's improv, you guys have a whole system of signals and things like that. And so how did having a guest drummer, specifically Ben, how did, integrating him into that kind of change the way that you approach the improv?
So I think the big thing that, like I was kind of saying, was honestly really not talking about the improv too much, other than like, here's where we're going to start. And if we have somewhere to go, here's where we're going to go. And that's it. And sometimes it's like a stop cue to a guitar player or stop cue to me for the next song, whatever it is. So a lot of times we would say, this one might work better as a build, or this one might work better to get to like ambient space, to if we're switching tempos kind of drastically or something, just because it's the first time, we want to make sure we get him started at the right tempo and there's not that kind of pressure. So there were some Brendan has done such a great job of kind of being the communicator to our drummers live when we're playing. So we have talkback mics up there, so we can all kind of it's kind of the dual purpose of cueing whatever's happening next, or doing things in the moment where our LD Ben Factor will be able to hear, like, okay, stop to both guitars coming up, and then he'll be able to nail the lighting cue with that improvisational thing. And for people who don't know what's going on, they're like, how did they do that? Because that must have been written into the show. So I always like those kind of things. So we still definitely use quite a few live cues where we were doing stops and stuff. But yeah, Brennan would kind of, give him little rhythmic things like, okay, the next thing, here comes the triplet thing, so he would have a little bit of an inkling of like, oh yeah, this is what's up next. Because he did his homework and he knew what's happening. But a lot of times you get into the live moment and it's like, okay, what's next? And being the drummer, you know, you don't want to lead him into a train wreck. So we wanted to make him look as good as possible. I mean, he did plenty himself, but yeah, having Brendan kind of there as that sort of guardrail to make sure that we all get to the next thing together as tightly as possible was really helpful. And like Ben nailed 99% of the stuff. So it was cool to have going into this. I mean, it was very sort of unsettling and, you know, just not knowing how things were going to go. And so, you know, both with Dwayne and Ben, and now Jeremy Salkin as well too. He played one of the Miss shows with us last weekend, and Jason Bonham, of course. We did the Zeppelin stuff with just now. But having like after that first sound check, I don't think anybody was nervous, and it's just such a nice feeling to be able to like oh wow, we can still play shows.
Yeah,
because you know after COVID nobody wants to be like, okay, well now we got to cancel 3 more months of shows, you know.
right.
Yeah, and all our wives are like, get the fuck out of the house. You know? So yeah, it's been great to be able to get back out there, and you know, it also feels a little bit like consensual polygamy, because you know it was like we're all doing this for Kris, right? But it's also fun because we're like, oh look, we could play with him, and nobody's gonna be mad at us.
Right.
So yeah. So you know, hopefully we'll have some double drums when he comes back, and be like, okay, we can share them with you now, Kris. It's okay.
Awesome. That's really cool.
So one of the things that struck me listening, you know, we were going to talk about some jams in a minute, but and Ryan and I talked about this as well before earlier today. There were times where Ben doesn't sound like Ben. He sounds like Umphrey's drummer, at least to us, to our ears. And he doesn't sound like Ben from Goose a lot. And I thought that was really impressive. And did you get that kind of vibe up there, that he really kind of was essentially like a chameleon and just put on the Umphrey's thing and was really trying to do the Umphrey's thing?
Yeah, I think there's probably some of that. I mean, we've told everybody, you know, look, don't feel like you need to come up here and be Kris. Like, be yourself. Play these songs however you want. Nobody's going to be mad at you about the arrangement. And like, I don't think any fans are going to be like, well, you know, he didn't play that fill. You know, that's
Right.
That's not going to happen. Everybody is here to experience something new and to, you know, I guess in effect allow Ben to kind of step out of that box a little bit of, you're the drummer of Goose, and to give him that freedom to be whatever he wants to be in the context of Umphrey's McGee, right? So I think that was an important thing that, you know, we've kind of shared with everybody, that as they've set in with us, like, look, man, we're going with your flow. We're just like we're glad you're here so we can play a show.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it's hard for me to say because I've only played with Ben and Goose once. So
Right.
you know, I don't know as much like what he sounds like with that. I think obviously, you know, Umphrey's sound is probably inherently a little more aggressive than the Goose sound. So, you know, it might have allowed him a little more freedom to kind of let loose and you know, and get a little heavier, I would think. But yeah, you know, I mean, I think the main thing that we all kind of realize, we're just, you know, we're there serving the songs and just trying to put together a good performance. And it hopefully it will be something new. I don't want it to sound like, I really don't want to play with these drummers and be like, oh man, you sounded just like Kris. Like, I don't want that, you know.
Right.
I want them to be themselves and to add their own, you know, musical taste and twist to whatever it is that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. And it was also cool to watch as, you know, the time went on with Ben. You know, he started like kind of just playing the second set or the last song of the first set. And then by the second night of the Mish, you know, he was doing pretty much the entire show, except for I think the first 2 songs. So it was really cool to watch him kind of get more and more. Were you teaching more songs the more time you spent with him?
Yeah, exactly. So we were just kind of adding more to the catalog. And the other big thing was like, we didn't want to get him up there and to have him uncomfortable about songs that he was going to play, you know? So when we talked to the drummers originally, we basically said to him, we want you to play like the second set and the encore. Mm-hmm. And Jake and Andy, our lead guitarist and percussionist, are both also kit drummers. And so we've had them kind of do some of the more complex Umphrey's arrangement tunes, kicking off the night with that, and then bringing up our special guests. So that's sort of helped us keep the set list a little more varied as well. Because obviously, the goal with the jam band on, a 4-show run is, can we make it through 4 shows and not repeat a song?
Right.
And I think that first weekend we repeated Staircase, and that might have been it.
Mm-hmm.
There might have been one more, but I think that was it. So, so everybody has really done a great job of like adding a couple things here and there. And, even on the spot, this is a pretty cool story. So Ben, flying out to the Mish this weekend, ended up sitting next to this Umphrey's fan, Tucker, whose 100th show was happening. And so Tucker ends up talking to him and tells him, he's like, I asked the band for this, but I don't expect you to do it. But there's this song, Paget's Profile, I've been chasing, and I haven't caught yet in 100 shows.
Oh, wow.
And so, it's Ben to learn it. And Ben showed up and he's like, I had this fan ask me about this song. What do you guys think? And we're like, well, we know it. So he learned it for him, and we played this guy's 100th show request, thanks to Ben. So I thought that was pretty cool of him to be like, I'm open to learn. It's a really strange kind of angular instrumental, so it's not one of those that's like just 4/4 start to finish.
Mm-hmm. Really, really cool.
Yeah, that's good to know. So Jeff does not take requests for Goose. So we know Ben's the guy we got to go to now.
There we go. Now everyone knows. If you end up next to Ben on a plane.
Yeah, I mean, there was no better person to actually bring that up to, right? Because Ben is the guy who will honor that request. That's just in his nature. He's the
if it had been any one of us, we'd be like, oh, we can't make Ben learn that. That's ridiculous, Yeah, so that worked out. Yeah, so definitely ask Ben for all your Goose requests. Sorry, Ben.
Perfect. Now we know. Well, let's dive into some of these jams here. You picked 3 that you wanted to highlight here from the show. So let's start with the Staircase from August 24th. This was in Huntsville, Alabama, I believe, for the first show of the run. Second set opener. I remember I was listening to the stream and, having, talked to you already a couple times this year about, Umphrey's improv and stuff. And you kind of emphasizing, like you haven't been going to the 20-minute mark a lot recently. There's been a lot of shorter jams, packing a lot into a shorter duration. And so when this one immediately went to the 20-minute mark, I was like, okay, like this is really cool. And it
and this is big for us too, because the composed part of Staircase is only like 3.5 minutes long. So it really is a pretty lengthy jam segment here. And it was great. We were all excited, and Ben was obviously ready to dive in. And, we hit a bunch of different themes. We changed keys a few times. And it was one of those where I was like, oh man, everybody's listening. We can all hear each other. This is super cool. So, great example of Ben kind of just continuing to push us along there. And I was very pleasantly surprised to see that it was 20 minutes long when I look back.
Yeah. Awesome. You guys got anything to add on that one?
Well, I'd just say this is like pretty much our newest single that we put out earlier this year, and a really cool collaborative tune, mostly between Ryan and Brendan, and I added a couple things in a little bit later in the process, but it's been one that we've just really started to open up a little bit this summer. So to get Ben in there on that, and to make this one kind of the first big, groove dance improv party was really special for us.
Mm-hmm. The point about it being recent is good, Neil. I know you had noticed that earlier among the 3 that you picked.
Yeah, they're actually all 3 new tunes. Staircase this year, and then Small Strides and Hiccup are from our most recent album, Asking for a Friend.
Well, let's talk about Small Strides here. This one is from Asheville Salvage Station on August 26th. Take us through, how did you feel about this one?
So we talked a little bit about this earlier here, but listening back to it, I remember making a little note, like it kind of really goes to another level at about 10 minutes. And Jake has this great lead that he does. And this one I feel like has maybe like 3 different kind of sections that, that build up and then break back down. And then we do a key change. And I was very excited listening back my one contribution. We had kind of a 2-chord thing going back, and then I threw in the 4-chord, and then we end up building up this big progression using that 1 flat 7 4 thing. Mm-hmm. Another one that Jake does, probably I think that's at about the 14 or 15 minute mark. And then I believe we ended up staying. I mean, I'd love to see the Michael Hamad jam chart of this one, because I think this one had multiple key changes and just felt really playful, and a very unusual way too of getting back to the brute. And then, as we were talking about this kind of slow bubbling build, and then it just that final groove just explodes. And I'll just never forget that moment, looking out at the crowd and just seeing everybody just losing their minds. It was awesome. So I think this Small Strides is probably my favorite thing that we did over the first 6 shows here.
No, I'm super glad you said that, because we talked about this a bunch, Ryan and I. And so I made a little playlist of these jams that we were talking about and listened to it a few times. And this is the one that I just kept coming back to. It's a really cool jam. And I'm a sucker for a multi-parter. And anytime you get kind of big changes in a jam, absolutely love it. And this one's really cool. It's dynamic, and it's got a lot of good stuff to check out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Neil and I on the same page as usual. This is probably my favorite as well. And just, I think what was really cool about this, and, Joel, we talked about this a little bit before we came on the air, but, I'm much more familiar with, a lot of your older catalog. And so it was kind of cool to hear all these more recent shows and hear some of these songs that I hadn't heard before. But yeah, all 3 of these jams you picked out were so good. But yeah, I think this was also my favorite.
Very cool. Very cool. And for a little extra credit, if somebody's looking, I had kind of a hard time picking out that this last one, Hiccup was the last one that I picked there. But the plunger that we just did from the encore of the last Mish was really fun. And Pure Saturation, I think from the Thursday of the Mish run, I really dug that too. And there were a couple other nuggets in the Asheville and the Chattanooga shows that I was really getting into, but I think that would probably round out my top 5 from what we've done with Ben so far.
Awesome. Well, yeah, you mentioned the Hiccup.
Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, speaking of jam, so I was at the Pembroke Mash show at Soundcheck. Ryan and I were both there, and not Ben on drums that day, but I think one of the coolest things I've seen in a while was watching Jake on drums for Slacker. That was amazing. I had no idea that he was capable of that. I just wanted to point that out while we were talking about this.
Yeah, he would be the star drummer in most bands. I mean, he's that good behind the kit. And our writing process, when I get together with Jake, what we usually do is, I'll try to come up with a chord progression or riff, and he'll play drums to start. Mm-hmm. So we'll do all of the demo tracking, trying to get through an arrangement that we've created with me on keys and him on drums. And then he'll go back and add bass and guitar after that.
Right. So that's so cool.
Yeah. So it's fun. I definitely remember mentioning this to him kind of early in these runs here. I'm like, Jake, man, this is totally giving me studio vibes. I love Jake's pocket. He's got such a great pocket that makes it really easy to play to.
Mm-hmm.
He
that's
hits
really cool.
the drums really hard. I mean, that was the thing that struck me most in the moment. I was like, holy shit. This guy's not, an everyday drummer, and he's hitting the drums that hard. I mean, I guess when you got one song to start off the show, you just go big.
Yeah, you can just go for it. Exactly. There's no pacing yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was funny. We got into, I think it was Resolution maybe, I mean, it was almost like a 20-minute version of Resolution with him on drums from, it was, I'm not sure which run. I think it was earlier in the Ben stuff. So probably 2 weekends ago, but I couldn't believe it. And he just kept going in this one jam. And I'm like, oh my God, like I would not have made it half that long. He's an incredible musician who's, great at multiple instruments.
That's awesome. Well, let's highlight your third jam here that you picked here, which is the Hiccup from the Mish. You mentioned honorable mentions. I'd like to give a shout out to the Mish Attachments for being 20 minutes and my favorite song. But let's talk about this Hiccup here.
Okay, so I picked this one because Jake actually reminded me of this after the show. He was like, "Oh yeah, we ended up coming up with this kind of cool theme." And I'm trying to think of what song it reminds me of right now. It's some Beatles song, but it was this cool, like, sort of major 70 riff that we had, and I was able to lock in on it with him for a little bit early on, and then we kind of hit a B section for that, and then we go on to something else completely different. But Hiccup is another one, newer song from Asking for a Friend, and I think this might have been maybe like the third or fourth time we've done it with improv. Two of them with Ben, and I think one of them with Dwayne and one of them with Kris.
Got it. Very cool.
So yeah, this is kind of this new improv thing for us, and we're just really tacking it on to the end of the song as opposed to doing something in the middle of it. But starting off with this, this big D major 7 chord, which is not very typical for Umphrey's. It's a little happier than we usually are, But I really liked the kind of uniqueness of that. And Ben was also doing some just really nice, understated tom work and things underneath the first section of that improv that I really dug too. So that was another reason why I wanted to pick that one to kind of showcase not just his, ability to play bigger dance grooves, but also be really, really subtle. And I think that really, honestly, going back to your previous question about like, how did he affect the improv? I think we felt like we had permission to be really dynamic and to bring some things down lower than I think typically we would be comfortable with.
Yeah. That's really cool. Thank you for that kind of insight into that. And now we are curious. We have a question that we didn't prep you for here. We're curious, knowing his love of potatoes, we're curious if he was able to add the potatoes to the Umphrey's rider.
We didn't get the potatoes onto the rider, but I know for a fact he had a couple good breakfasts with some breakfast potatoes. There was definitely some catering one or two of the nights where I noticed there were some potatoes there. So his love for potatoes did not go unsaturated. And I think, I hope he knows that we respect the potato just like he does. A side note, I went skiing with a bunch of friends this past winter in Sun Valley, Idaho. And one of the nights when we stayed up way too late and were just acting like idiots, we came up with the idea of like, oh my God, in Idaho, man, you got to stay away. You got to watch out for Big Potato, man. Big Potato fucking crush you, you get in their way. So, yeah. So, it's nice to have the actualization of Spuds enjoying his potatoes and knowing that we can help with his love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a bit, it's like it's a thing that just goes on. Like the potato thing is like really a thing. But that brings up, I guess, like a more serious question of what's it like? It's not a sit-in when you have a guy out there for 6 shows or whatever. What's it like being on tour with a guest? And like, how does that change things as a band?
Yeah, well, all the people that we've had so far have just been so awesome to hang with, So Dwayne is, we've been friends with Dwayne for a long, long time. And there's kind of a brotherhood there. And I think with Ben, it's sort of the same thing where, he loves hanging too. And so that's honestly 75% of the gig, right? like 25% of it you're making music, maybe a little more because we actually have to like run everything now. So maybe it's 65-35. But you know, you have to be able to get along with people and to be able to roll with the punches, and you know, if things change, and Ben's so good at that and just made it really seamless. So yeah, it's nice to know that we picked some people who took the music seriously, but that also came out and like really brought some joy to it.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, anything else from you guys before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just wanted to just a reminder to everybody to go check out these shows on Nugs.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Neil, have you shared your playlist? That might be something people might want to check out as well.
Joel's favorite.
Yeah. And maybe we can make sure all the Joels are on there too, which I'm sure they probably already are. But yeah, I guess my final thought would just be, you know, a massive thank you to you, Joel, for coming on. This is really cool. And just your, I've always appreciated your, you know, your social media presence and your interactions with fans, and, you know, so just a real treat to actually get a chance to kind of meet you a little bit more in person today. And yeah, we're so thankful that you came on the pod. And so, yeah, best of luck with everything moving forward, man.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate y'all having me, and you know, checking out the music and helping support live music. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's been great. You know, this is now our third podcast this year, which is pretty cool. I'm sure there will be another one. But you know, we're really excited. Also, you know, Neil is the only one of us that'll be at the show tomorrow, but Goose Fall Tours kicks off in Boston tomorrow, which is very, very exciting. You know, we've got over the next few weeks, lots of shows coming up. And of course, that means we will be doing our day after show live podcast the day after every single show at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. So don't forget to tune in for those. I know, Joel, I heard a rumor that you may be attending one.
Yeah, I may be. If I'm in town, I will certainly try to make my presence known. Not too known, just a little bit known.
Right. Just a little bit. Exactly. Exactly. A hint, if you will. Well, thank you again so much for being here today, Joel. It's, again, just echoing what B said. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to chat with you about all this stuff. Looking forward to you know, hearing how the rest of the drummer collaborations go, and whatever future collaboration with Ben that you may have hinted at. Very exciting.
It is exciting stuff, no doubt.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Always Almost There. We will be back on Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern to talk about Boston Night 1, and we will see you then.